Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Dog Walk, the uncut, unedited, one take show where I discuss whatever's been on my mind for that day while I'm out taking Mista and Daisy for a little bit of exercise. And the show where I tend to ramble on so much that maybe 50% of the time I talk about 50% of the stuff I want to talk about, maybe 25% of the time. So today I was actually thinking of skipping a recording. I actually didn't record yesterday because, to be frank, I am extremely tired. Not only because I had physio and that was a lot of exercise today, but also Felix has been. This week we moved him from his bassinet to his crib. He graduated, and it's been relatively okay, but he has been waking up throughout the night a lot more than usual, and that has been taking quite the toll on me because right now I am the one on parental leave and my spouse is working. We will be switching roles after we get back from our trip to China, but for now, I'm it. And since she works, well, I'm the one who goes and takes care of him in the middle of the night. So I am quite fatigued, but I didn't want to skip 2 days in a row because I don't want to lose momentum of this thing, which is very easy to do. So here we are with what will likely be a quick. Although I realize now as I'm starting to post things that I tend to say a quick talk a lot, and it rarely is the case. But anyway, here we go. Attempting to have a quick one where I will be discussing, as promised, the second aspect of the kind of trilogy of topics that I wanted to talk about. If you missed the previous episode, I highly recommend you start with that one, where I talk a little bit more about why I think humans need to take a longer term view, a fourth dimensional view of their existence, as opposed to just what's the best for me now type of mentality that seems to be prevalent everywhere nowadays. So that was part one. Today, part two, I'm going to talk about government and political systems. And then the next part will be about future economy. Now, I will provide a disclaimer here to say this is likely not the final form of my political theory, I'll say. Mostly because I haven't had the time to sit down and actually think through all the consequences of all the different possibilities of reorganization that are swirling around in my head. That's something that will take a lot more time and a lot more thought and a lot more reading too, right? I haven't finished Leviathan. I read The Republic so long ago. A lot of my thoughts on democracy have also been sort of polluted by the current state of democracy and a bunch of other things like that. So I really need to think about it a lot more before I have a final answer, because right now I have several different possibilities in mind on how democracy could be reformed to better suit the needs of the 21st century. But as I said, one of the big problems, as I mentioned in the previous episode, one of the big problems with most political systems is not the theory behind the political system, but rather the practice. In theory, I think communism is an almost perfect system. In theory, so is capitalism. The problem is, in practice, there is not a single example of uncorrupted, perfect application of communism or capitalism anywhere in the world, and that wouldn't be any different for any reform that I would think of. And see, here I am saying capitalism and communism, which are clearly two economic systems rather than political ones, although you could argue that communism does have a political aspect to it, because it implies a certain societal organization and power structure for it to even be possible as an economic system. But that relates again to, as I was saying yesterday, how all these topics are very much linked together. And as per the example I've mentioned a few times now, we need more generalists, less generals. So I think that the only way to truly come up with something that works is to look at all of these things and how they affect our lives holistically, as opposed to always trying to fix and only look at one of those things at a time individually in a silo, right? We need the Herc pilot, for those who remember that episode, to talk to the Maritime Patrol pilot and the F-18 guy, right? So that to get a bit of an outside perspective, because if you only stay in your lane, in your silo always, that makes it so much harder to have any novel ideas. So that's why I truly think whoever will come up with our next good political system, something like that, he's not going to be just a philosopher. He's not going to be just an economist. He's going to be a little bit of everything. But anyway, I digress and I ramble. Let me try to rein it back in. So I'll keep it to the basic premise and basic concept that supports, or that underlies, kind of all of my different ideas on how to modernize our political system. Actually, before that, just a few points. So one of the big problems that we have right now is voter apathy, right? How many elections keep getting reported as having the lowest turnout ever? How many news articles are written about, people tuning out? Misa, wait. Sorry, the dog leashes are tangled. And Daisy is staying behind, so I need to untangle to fix it. Okay, Daisy, come on. Go. Daisy, go. Okay, sorry about that. Come on. Okay, so, and there used to be a joke that I remember in university, where basically it said, if you tell a room full of mathematicians that you vote, they will laugh. All of them will laugh you out of the room, right? Why is that? Because mathematicians understand that the way our democracy is built right now, your vote, I'm sorry to say, your single vote doesn't matter. It never has, never will. Whether it's because of little gimmicks, especially like what they have in the States with I think they call it gerrymandering, when they, redline districts in order to change the proportions of populations, to change how many the seats who gets elected based on redistricting and all that, or several other nefarious tactics, electoral college, that type of stuff, or even just at the very, very basic, old school Greece democracy level of the direct democracy. Never has an important election been determined by a single vote. So if you ask if you tell a mathematician that you vote, just like if you tell them that you play the lottery, they will laugh at you. You know, the lottery is a tax on the mathematically illiterate, but that's a different point. So that's a problem, right? These smart people do not want to vote because they think that their vote doesn't matter, or they understand that their vote doesn't matter mathematically. That's a huge problem. The other issue is that there are so many different votes to all the time in the US that people get tired of it. But why do they get tired of it? Because they're always voting for the exact same thing, and they only have two options. And really, it's most cases really it's six and six on one side, half a dozen on the other, right? People don't think that the vote actually matters, or that they don't identify or connect with the party as a whole for whom they vote. Sorry, I need to take care of. Oh wait, actually, never mind. Okay, I thought Mistra pooped, but I just realized that it isn't a poop. It's just a pee. So we can keep going. Yeah, so that's a huge problem, and I think that's just gonna keep getting worse as both sides of the spectrum continue to become more and more and more extreme. As I mentioned in another previous episode, the whole echo chamber confirmation bias. The only way to get noticed in your party is to be more extreme than the other one, because moderates don't make crowds cheer. So that's just horrible. So how can we fix this? Well, I don't have all the answers, but I think that one of the first things that we need to do is we need to start to use 21st century tools to our benefit. What I mean by that is maybe we can use mathematics to make elections fairer. Maybe not all votes. Sorry, this is going to be extremely controversial to say, but maybe not all votes. Every vote is worth the same, right? Maybe when you're talking about healthcare, the opinion of the head of Cedars-Sinai Hospital might be worth a little bit more and might be a little bit better informed than whatever Billy Ray Bob Joe down in Louisiana with his grade 4 education, what he thinks, right? There's definitely something there. Misla's pulling like crazy. Come back, Misla. Come on. So, that's not really the basis of the argument I want to make. It's a little bit too controversial and coming in a little bit too hot off the press there by saying that we should prorate votes to a certain value. But that would be one way, right, to make sure that everyone still has a say. I'm not saying Billy Bob doesn't get a vote. I'm just saying that, hey, maybe his vote is worth half of the vote of someone who has completed college in a science field is worth. And that vote of Mr. College Guy might be worth half of the vote of an actual practicing doctor or something like that. You get my drift. And I'm not saying that's the actual math or the actual solution. It's just an example. So that would be one way to make sure that everyone still gets a say, but maybe not everyone's say is worth exactly the same. And hey, the vote of the doctor in Cedars-Sinai might be worth twice your vote when it comes to healthcare, but maybe you're a professional in the aerospace industry, and your vote when it comes related to that field, transportation. Maybe your vote is worth twice the vote of twice their vote, right? You get what I mean, right? So that would be one way to do it, but let me get to the actual real underlying point that I have, because you could do that. You can parse votes so many different ways, right? You could have votes prorated based on age, right? So that you can give as much of a voice to young people, or even a larger voice to the young people who are going to inherit this country, rather than the old folks who are about to leave it to go on to a better, different world, right? Or maybe you want the opposite, right? Maybe it's better to say, hey, these people are wise, they've been around, their vote should be worth a little bit more than the vote of an 18-year-old who's never been out of their parents' house and has lived in their parents' basement, and will continue to do so for the next 2 decades while they're pursuing their dream of becoming a content creator on YouTube, or a Overwatch 2 streamer on Twitch, right? Sorry, again, I'm continuing to give examples that aren't my main point. So let me actually get to it now. What I think one of the bigger problems is, and it's related to the gerrymandering that I mentioned earlier, is that all of our votes are still based on voting for a single representative from a single party in our locality, right, in our geographic region. Now, I'll say how many of you as if I'm talking to people, but like Felix, I'm sure you are part of a community. You're probably part of more than one community, right? Are you in a, I'll say World of Warcraft, whatever RPG, VR MMORPG you're in? Are you in a guild with those people? Are you part of a, I don't know, are you part of a professional order of engineers, or the chapter of electricians, or something like that? Are you a fan of a certain TV show? Point is that so many. If you ask someone down the street what communities they are part of, likely, yes, some people will talk about their home, but most people nowadays, thanks to the internet, their community is non-local. Their community is online, or it's through correspondence, or it's to as I said, a professional order that's countrywide, or something like that. So why are we still voting as if the only thing that matters is where we live? Right? Yes, you need local government. You need, right? And the best people to govern the city are people who live in the city. But when you're talking about countrywide issues, how is it relevant, on my opinion or my position on what healthcare should be, or education, whether I live in Canada or in Montreal, or in Vancouver, or in Red Deer, Alberta, or in Nunavut, right? It shouldn't matter, because your opinion on education should be the same, or shouldn't change just because you moved towns because of a new job. I'll say it that way. Right? So why am I voting for the local representative as if the fact that they happen to live in the same place as I do really matters at the provincial or national level? I would say that it wouldn't. It doesn't, when you really think about it. I think the only reason why that's how our votes are organized is because before the internet, before, like, up until very recently, you could grow up in a town and never in your entire life set foot, 2 towns over, 20 miles away, right? You could live your entire life within a 10-mile radius from where you were born. Nowadays, you work for a few hours and you can afford a plane ticket to the other side of the planet, right? That's maybe a slight exaggeration, but you get my point. So, our voting methodology had to be geographically imposed just because people couldn't go anywhere else, right? People couldn't go to their capital city to vote. They had to vote locally. So that's I think, at least, the main origin or the main reason why elections are organized this way. Well, that's no longer the case. So maybe we can do something about that. Hey, it might be great to keep, how do I say, like, local oriented domains. But why am I, oh yeah, and sorry, now the sorry. And one of the big issues, the big, sorry, just want to make sure that the dogs are safe. What was I gonna say? I just lost my train of thought with there. Darn it. I completely forgot what the other point I was gonna bring is, but anyway, I guess I'll say that this is gonna be a pain to subtitle as I'm hesitating and humming and hawing. Yeah, anyway. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, yeah, you keep, a local level of government, and that could be even a parallel branch of government, right? We have 3 branches of government, at least in Canada, the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. Ooh. So maybe there's still 3 branches, but one of those branches become the geographical vote. And oh yeah, that's the other point I wanted to make. Yeah, and I just remembered. But I'll finish what I was about to say. But you also have in parallel the second branch, because let's face it, legislative and executive. Why aren't those 2 things combined? Anyway. They could be considered the same branch or separate within 2 sub branches of the same branch of government. Anyway, yeah, so you could have the geographically driven electoral vote, but also have an issue driven electoral vote, which would get around the problem of it being impossible to separate or to hold complex positions, I'll say, in the today's, especially in the States. I'll use the US as the best example of this, because they really are, regardless of what anyone else says to the contrary, they are a 2-party system, right? So you can't in the States be socially liberal but fiscally conservative. There's just no party for that. It doesn't exist, right? And I can think of so many other positions, right? You can't be pro-Trump, but also think that girls, but also think that we need to do something about the environment, right? Or conversely, you can't be anti-racist and woke and liberal socially, but also not believe in climate change, or right? I'm sure you can think of a bunch of other complex positions, right? Basically, anywhere you have to always pick the lesser of 2 evils. No party maybe aligns with your actual. Hey, maybe maybe it does. Maybe the Republicans, you agree with every single position that they have, and that's great, right? But if that's not the case, then the current system is so limiting. So why can't we have elections where you vote for, let's say, who you want as your local or geographical representative, but you also vote for who you want to govern on the, let's say, environmental portfolio, and who you want to govern on the economy, and who you want to govern, right? Like separate out topics, kind of like departments in the public sector or public service. Separate those out and vote for those, so that you can vote for the equivalent of, let's say, a Green Party position, while also voting for a very conservative money policy. Or you can vote on a very open immigration policy, but no restrictions on climate change, right? You can kind of select what you think about a few, and this is where I'd need more research to determine, what actual categories you should present, because you don't want to overload everyone and have 60 different choices, unless you're making it in a way where your vote is kind of, instead of having election cycles, your vote is permanent until you choose to change it. That would be a big change in the way this system works, right? You have a secure portal, you log in, and you can say, hey, I'm fiscally conservative, and you set that when you reach voting age, and until and unless you change your mind, your vote remains fiscally conservative. And it's only when, again, using modern, mathematical tools, only when a certain tipping point is achieved, and 60% of people now are, their opinion is consistent with what is the minority, or the current minority government, in big quotes, in that position. Well, when they reach 60%, you switch, and now whoever is representing that becomes a new person in charge, right? Anyway, again, details need to be hammered out. So that would be one way to have several, like to increase the granularity of what fields people vote on. But otherwise, if you keep to a 4-ish year election cycle, I would say at max 5 or 6 different topics. You can vote on economy, society, environment. I have something like that. Again, I'd need to parse it out more thoughtfully. And instead of having the Republican Party candidate, you have people who present themselves as part of it could be a party, right? It needs a structure, but you would have kind of parties for each one of those voting sectors. So you don't have the Republican Party, where if you vote for it, or the Democrat Party, where if you vote for it, you're voting for everything that comes with it. You can pick the equivalent of the liberal position on one, the conservative position on the other, and whoever presents themselves as a representative to be elected, they are doing it for that sector. I hope that makes sense. I don't know what you think about that. Is that something that could work? Like, what would be the big problems with that? You could have debates for each one of those sectors, and everyone would vote. And I do truly believe that this would not only help us govern a little bit better, because we would be able to better represent how people actually think, but also we would get away from these silly geographical, archaic geographical limitations, and it would also, I think, decrease voter apathy, because right now, as I said, everyone thinks, it's it's six or half a dozen. It's the same thing on either side. My vote doesn't matter. I agree with half of what one side says and half of what the other says. So really, why the hell am I gonna vote? Right? None of them are gonna change what I want. But if you know that, hey, I can vote on a very, on environmental policy. Anyway, I think that would help decrease voter apathy, because it would make people think that their vote matters a little bit more, because they're choosing more than just a big umbrella that doesn't actually represent. They pick what actually represents their opinion on every one of the 5 topics, let's say. So yeah, that's the intro to my idea of how a better political government, electoral system could be implemented. Please let me know down below what you think. Do the whole, comment, like, subscribe, whatever. Appreciate any engagement. I'm sure there's holes, and I'm sure that I'm not the first person to think of this. So if you've heard this idea before, let me know where. I'd like to read up on it, and let me know any objections, or what were the good things or the bad things that were raised with that idea. I would really appreciate it. And on that note, thanks, and have a good evening.